I spent 40 years in the trades, and the one thing that work taught me, the thing no foreman ever said out loud but every good carpenter understood, is that you can always tell the difference between a structure that was built to last and one that was built to look like it would. You learn to read the small things. A door that swings just a little too easily. Baseboards that meet at the corner but don't quite sit flush. Drywall compound that's been sanded smooth but feathered too wide, hiding something underneath. You develop an eye for the gap between appearance and reality, and once you have it, you can't turn it off. Not at a job site. Not at a dinner table. Not in your own home. I should have trusted that eye a long time ago. My name is Walter. No, wait. I keep getting ahead of myself. My wife always said that about me. She said I told stories the way I drove on the 401, too fast in the wrong lane. She wasn't wrong about that, or much else, honestly. God rest her. My name is Jerry. I'm 63 years old. I lived for most of my adult life. In Barrie, Ontario. About 90 minutes north of Toronto. Not a small town, not quite a city. The kind of place where you know your neighbors enough to wave from the driveway, but not enough to knock on the door unannounced. I retired early at 58 after a back surgery that didn't go the way the surgeon promised it would. Spent 37 years doing residential and light commercial framing. Started as a laborer at 17 carrying lumber in the rain. Ended up owning a crew of 12 and a decent little company that I sold when I couldn't swing a hammer anymore without my left leg going numb. That sale set me up. Not rich, not Bay Street rich, but comfortable. The mortgage on the house was paid. I had a registered retirement account, some GICs, a rental property on Penetang Street that brought in $1,200 a month after expenses. I had a plan, and the plan was modest. Live quietly, watch the hockey, maybe take a trip out west to see BC before my knees got any worse, and leave something behind for my daughter when the time came. My daughter, Renee, is 34. Sharp girl. Used to be, anyway. She got her business administration from Georgian College, and for a few years she was working for a property management company downtown. Doing well, climbing. I was proud of her. Still am, and the way that you're proud of someone even after they've hurt you badly enough that you can't quite look at old photographs without having to put them face down. She met her husband, Darcy, about 6 years ago. He was working in sales. Always in sales. A different company every 18 months. Always with a reason why the last place didn't see his potential. Darcy is the kind of man who enters a room and immediately starts calculating what he can get out of it. I saw it at the first dinner. My wife, rest her soul, pulled me aside in the kitchen afterward and said, "Jerry, be fair. You're hard on everyone at first." And I said, "Donna, I'm not being hard. I'm being honest." But I let it go. Because Renee was happy. And because I was wrong about people before. I wasn't wrong about Darcy. The first 3 years were fine on the surface. They got married on a Saturday in September at a vineyard in Niagara-on-the-Lake, $22,000, most of which I paid for. I didn't mind. It was what Donna would have wanted. Donna had passed 14 months before the wedding, breast cancer, and I think part of me was throwing money at the wedding to make it what she would have planned herself. I put $22,000 on my line of credit and paid it off over 8 months and didn't say a word about it. That was the first mistake, not saying a word, because after the wedding the asking didn't stop. It shifted. It became less asking and more assuming. Darcy's car needed to be replaced. Could I help with a down payment? They were looking at a house in Innisfil, and the stress test was making it difficult. Could I bridge a short-term loan? Just until they got the financing sorted. Renee wanted to take a course to upgrade her credentials. Could I cover the tuition? $6,000 here, $4,000 there. I kept a note on my phone with the running total, not because I was keeping score, but because I'm a numbers man. By the time this story becomes what it became, I had given, or let me be accurate, given, because none of it came back, just over $41,000 over 4 years. And that's fine. Parents help. That's what parents do. The money wasn't the wound. The wound was something else. What I didn't see happening, slowly, in the way that slow things never announce themselves, was that I was becoming useful rather than loved. There's a difference, and you feel it before you can name it. It's in how often the phone rings versus how often you're actually asked how you're doing. It's in whether someone stays at the dinner table after dessert or starts collecting their coat. It's in how Renee began looking at Darcy before she answered my questions. Just a glance, just a half second of checking, but I caught it every time. I had a medical scare in October 2 years ago. Nothing dramatic, I thought. Might just started doing something strange late one evening while I was watching the news. Not pain, exactly. More like pressure, like someone had placed a hand flat against my sternum and was leaning on it. My left arm felt heavy and slightly distant, the way a limb feels when you've been sleeping on it wrong. I sat with it for 20 minutes, which I know now was 20 minutes too long, and then I called Renee. She didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. I called Darcy's cell. He picked up on the fourth ring, and I could hear the noise behind him, music, voices, the particular echo of a large room with hard floors. I said, "Darcy, I need to talk to Renee. Something's happening with my chest. I don't want to alarm anyone, but I think I should go in." There was a pause. He said, "Oh, we're at the Hendersons right now. It's Ryan's birthday thing. I'll tell her you called, okay? You probably just need some water. You've been stressed." And he hung up. I sat on the edge of my couch for a moment, with the television still on, and looked at the wall. Then I called 911 myself. The paramedics were at my door in 6 minutes. I remember one of them, a young woman with a red braid down her back, asking me to rate the pressure on a scale of 1 to 10 while she got the leads attached. I told her 7. She said, quietly but without drama, "Okay, we're going, don't worry." They were kind. They were competent. They got me to Royal Victoria before something significantly worse could happen. The cardiologist who saw me in the ER that night, a small man with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, used the phrase acute myocardial event in the same tone someone might use to say minor fender bender. But what I understood from the rest of what he said was that if I had waited another 40 minutes on that couch, I might not have been able to walk back to it. I had emergency angioplasty, a stent placed, 3 days in hospital, then a week in a step-down unit. Renee and Darcy came on day 4, not day 1, day 4. When they walked in, Renee hugged me and said she was so glad I was okay, and her eyes were wet, and I believe that part was real. But then Darcy stood near the window with his arms crossed and said, "You really scared us, Jerry. You should have called sooner." And something in me, some structural thing, some load-bearing piece, shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Like a foundation that's moved a centimeter after a hard frost. You can't see it yet, but the door won't quite close right anymore. I found out later from a mutual acquaintance that the Hendersons' party had gone until 1 a.m. Ryan Henderson had just been promoted to VP at a tech company in Toronto, and the evening had apparently been something of a celebration. Renee and Darcy had stayed until the end. The hospital tried to reach Renee 3 times that first night. I gave permission for them to discuss my condition with her. The first call, according to the nurse I spoke to afterward, a big, cheerful Newfoundlander named Judy, who had no idea how significant the information was answered. Renee said she'd be there as soon as possible and hung up. The second call, 40 minutes later, went to voicemail. The third call, after midnight, was answered. The night nurse I spoke with said the person on the other end had said, "Look, he's stable, right? Then we'll come first thing tomorrow. I'm sorry, but it's very late," and hung up again. "He's stable. We'll come first thing tomorrow." They came on day 4. I lay in that hospital bed and stared at the ceiling tile and thought about the $41,000. I thought about the Niagara-on-the-Lake wedding. I thought about Darcy at the window with his arms crossed, saying I should have called sooner. I thought about my wife, Donna, who had been in a hospital bed herself once, 5 years before she died, for a minor procedure, a cyst removed from her shoulder, nothing serious. And I had slept in the chair beside her bed the entire night because I could not bring myself to be anywhere else. I thought about what it meant that no one had been in the chair beside my bed for 3 nights, and how quiet that room had been, and how long the nights had felt. I'm not a man who cries easily. My father wasn't, and neither am I. But I cried once, the second night, alone, looking at the monitor, tracking my own heartbeat like it was the only thing in the room that was genuinely invested in whether I continued. By the third night, I had stopped crying and started thinking. My financial advisor, a careful woman named Janet who has been handling my accounts since before Donna passed, picked up the phone on the first ring when I called her the morning of day 3. I spoke quietly because I had a roommate behind a curtain. I told Janet what had happened and what I was thinking, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Jerry, are you sure? This is a permanent change." And I said, "Janet, I've never been more sure of anything since I poured the footings on my first house." She said she'd start pulling documents. The rental property on Penetang Street, the investment account at TD, the TFSA, the GICs, the registered accounts. Over the following 2 weeks after discharge, working quietly and methodically, I restructured. The rental property I put into a numbered holding company with my brother Alan as the sole secondary director. The investment accounts I transferred to a discretionary trust with a lawyer in Aurelia, who Alan recommended, a dry, precise man named Patterson who spoke entirely in declarative sentences and charged $420 an hour and was worth every cent of it. The will, which had left everything jointly to Renee, I revised entirely. I did not tell Renee or Darcy. I did not tell them about the restructuring. I did not tell them about the new will. I did not change anything visible on the surface. I still had dinner with them on the 3rd Sunday of each month. Still answered the phone when Renee called. Still helped when she texted asking if I knew a good electrician or what temperature to braise short ribs at. I was pleasant. I was present. I was the same Jerry I'd been on the outside, but the load-bearing structure had been quietly moved somewhere else. 3 months after discharge, Darcy asked me for a loan. Not a gift, he was careful to say. A loan. $4,500. He had an opportunity, a side venture, a friend from his sales days who was starting an importing business and needed startup capital, and it would only be 6 to 8 months, and he was going to get me documentation and everything. I looked at him across the Sunday dinner table and I said, "Darcy, I appreciate you coming to me. Let me think about it." He nodded and smiled and seemed satisfied. I thought about it for exactly 45 seconds. The answer was no, but I didn't say no yet. I said I was still thinking. 6 weeks later, I called Renee and told her I was putting the house on the market. The silence on the phone was extraordinary. "You're selling the house?" "I am." "Dad, why? Where are you going?" "I'm going to simplify. The maintenance on this place is getting to be too much with my back, and I've been thinking about a smaller space, maybe a condo." "When did you decide this?" "I've been thinking about it since the hospital." Another silence. "Then what about, what happens to, what's the plan with the money?" And there it was. Not where will you go? Are you okay? Do you want help moving? But what happens to the money? I told her I was working with a financial advisor and everything was in order. I kept my voice neutral. She asked 2 more questions. Both, I noticed, circling back to the financial question from slightly different angles, and then said she had to go because Darcy had dinner on the stove. The house sold in 11 days. This is Barry. The market was still tight. I took the proceeds, added them to the restructured accounts, and moved into a 2-bedroom condo in a building on Dunlop Street East, with underground parking, a gym I don't use, and a view of the water that I sit and look at most mornings with my coffee, and feel something very close to peace. I did not give Renee the new address immediately. I told her I was still sorting out the move. This is the part of the story that people sometimes struggle with. They say, "But she's your daughter. Don't you think you're being too hard?" And I understand that. I do. Renee is not Darcy. She is not purely mercenary. There are parts of her that are still the girl who used to fall asleep on the drive back from her grandmother's and who cried at the end of every sports movie, even when she knew the ending. I love her. That's not the question. The question is what love is when it's conditional, when it's activated by proximity to a hospital room and deactivated by a good party, when it defaults to Darcy's calculation before it defaults to my voice on the phone. I called Renee on a Sunday morning in March and asked her if she'd like to have lunch. She said yes immediately, which I noticed quick. Yes, no checking with Darcy first. We met at a restaurant on Bayfield Street that she likes, and we sat across from each other, and I ordered a club sandwich, and she ordered a salad, and we talked about ordinary things for 45 minutes, the way you do when both of you know there's something else underneath, but neither of you is ready to open the floor. Then I told her. Not everything. I didn't show her spreadsheets or walk her through the trust documents. I simply told her that I had made some significant changes to my financial and estate planning after the cardiac event, that everything was in order and she shouldn't worry, and that the decisions I'd made reflected where I was now and what I felt was right. She put down her fork. What kind of changes? Comprehensive ones. Dad. She looked at me the way she used to look at me when she was 16 and she'd been caught in something and was trying to figure out how much I knew. Are you saying what I think you're saying? What do you think I'm saying? She was quiet for a moment. Then, is this because of the hospital? Because we came as soon as we could. We had. Renee. I said it gently. I wasn't angry. The strange thing is that by the time I had that lunch, I wasn't angry anymore at all. I was past it. I'm not asking you to justify anything. I'm telling you, as your father, that I've made decisions that I believe are the right ones. I'm healthy, I'm comfortable, I'm not going anywhere, but some things have changed. She didn't eat much after that. Darcy called me that evening. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was 14 sentences long, I counted later when I played it back, and which covered, in order, concern for my health and state of mind, a suggestion that I might be making emotional decisions based on the stress of the cardiac event, a reminder that he and Renee had always been there for me, a reference to the lone conversation, phrased as that misunderstanding, and, in the final 2 sentences, almost as an afterthought, a question about whether I had spoken to a doctor lately, about how these kinds of health events can affect cognition. Act cognition. I didn't return the call. I poured a small whiskey, a 40 Creek Canadian through and through, and sat by the window looking at the water. The following month, Darcy made a decision that clarified things considerably. He told Renee that they should consult a lawyer to explore whether my post-event decision-making could be considered legally compromised. She went along with it. I know this because Patterson, my lawyer in Aurelia, received a letter of inquiry from a firm in Barrie asking for information about my mental capacity at the time the trust was established. Patterson called me the afternoon the letter arrived. He read me the relevant section in the same flat declarative tone he uses for everything, and then there was a brief silence, and he said, "They won't get anywhere with this. Your capacity was assessed by your cardiologist and noted in the documentation, but I thought you should know." I thanked him. I sat with the knowledge for about a day. Then I called my daughter. I told her that I knew about the letter. I told her, without raising my voice, that what Darcy had done was not something I could overlook, and that her participation in it, even as a passive passenger, had consequences. I told her that I loved her. I told her I hoped she would find her way back to herself at some point, and that when she did, I would still be her father. And I told her that until that day came, I needed distance. I did not slam the phone down. I said goodbye, and I ended the call, and I set the phone on the counter and made myself a cup of tea. Red Rose, the same brand my mother kept in the cupboard above the stove in the house I grew up in. And I stood in my kitchen, in my condo on Dunlop Street East, looking at the water through the window. And I felt, for the first time in a very long time, like a structure that had been properly restored. Not new, not undamaged, but sound, plumb, load-bearing where it needed to be. Alan came up from Toronto that weekend, and we went fishing out on Kempenfelt Bay. which was maybe not the smartest thing for a man with a cardiac history to be doing in early April, but the doctor had cleared me for moderate activity, and sitting in a boat arguing with my brother about whether the Leafs had a real shot this year felt like exactly what a person needs. We didn't catch much. The company was sufficient. I think about Renee. Of course I do. I wonder what their life looks like inside that Innisfield house. Whether she's happy in the way I used to hope she'd be happy. Whether some morning she'll wake up and see clearly what she's been participating in. I don't hate her. I don't even resent her. Not really. Resentment requires ongoing contact to stay warm, and I've let the temperature drop to something manageable. What I resent, if I'm honest, is the $41,000. Not because of the money, but because every dollar was a decision I made out of love, and she and he received it the way people receive tap water, expected, automatic, entirely unnoticed unless it stops. Patterson sent me the finalized trust documentation 6 weeks ago. Everything is in order. My brother Alan, my 2 oldest friends, a small amount to the Barry Food Bank in my mother's name. Everything documented, witnessed, airtight. I'm not a wealthy man. I'm a careful one. My cardiologist cleared me for full activity at my last appointment. He looked at my file and then looked at me and said, "Whatever you've been doing the last 8 months, keep doing it. Your stress markers are better than they were before the event." I told him I'd made some changes. He nodded and said that usually helped. I go to a cardiac rehab program on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at the hospital. There's a woman there, a retired school teacher named Bev. No, different name. Her name is Carol, who started at the same time as me and who tells the driest jokes in the warm-up circle and who is, by some margin, the most sensible person I've spoken to in the last 2 years. We've had coffee after the Thursday session 4 times now. I am 63 years old and slightly out of shape and still have a faint scar on my chest, and I am not in any rush toward anything. But the coffee is good, and the conversation is better, and I look forward to Thursdays in a way I haven't looked forward to much of anything in a while. Last week, Renee sent me a text, just 5 words. "Dad, I miss you. Please." I read it 3 times. I put the phone face down on the counter, the same way I used to put photographs when I couldn't look at them. I haven't answered yet. I will. I'm not a man who closes doors permanently. I've spent too many years hanging them to have that kind of relationship with a door. But I'm also not going to walk back through one just because someone is standing on the other side of it. I'm going to wait. I'm going to see whether the knock sounds like Renee or whether it sounds like Darcy behind her with his hand on her shoulder and his eyes on my square footage. When you work in construction long enough, you understand that the most important work is never the part anyone sees. It's the footings, poured below the frost line, invisible once the walls go up. It's the blocking between the studs. It's the hangers, the straps, the hurricane ties, all the quiet connectors doing their work behind the drywall while everyone else admires the kitchen cabinet handles. I spent 63 years building things. Some of them lasted. Some of them I let stay even after I could see the cracks, because tearing something down is harder than it looks, and because a part of me always hoped the settling would stop on its own. It didn't, but I know now how to build again, and I know what kind of foundation to pour this time, and I know, this time, exactly who I'm building it for.